In a clinical trial running right now, patients are being given a single intravenous infusion that goes to the liver, finds one specific gene, and changes one letter of their DNA permanently. And their cholesterol falls by more than half. And as far as we can tell, it stays down. No daily tablet, no injections, one dose. I've had so many patients bring this up recently in clinic that I thought it warranted a video. And what we'll do is we'll run through why this particular gene was chosen. And that's honestly one of the best detective stories in cardiology. Then we'll talk through what the editing actually looks like and what it does inside your cells. And then the human data, including the earlier version of this treatment that was paused for safety reasons, which the headlines have tended to leave out. And then the honest assessment of where this sits. And to be completely clear up front, this is an experimental therapy in very early clinical trials, and nobody can get this. It's not small print, that's the context for everything else. This is not available. So the gene being edited is called PCSK9. And the reason we trust it as a target is actually a genuinely good science detective story. In the early 2000s, researchers studying families in France with very high inherited cholesterol found some mutations that made this type of gene overactive. These patients had more PCSK9 and therefore had higher cholesterol and early heart attacks. Now, the interesting twist came from the opposite direction. There was a group in Texas who went looking for people with mutations that break the gene, and they found them, walking around perfectly healthy with low LDLs their whole lives. And in that Dallas heart study, about 2% of Black Americans carried one broken copy of PCSK9, and their LDL ran about 28% lower lifelong, and their risk of coronary heart disease was reduced by nearly 90%. Now that's a remarkable number. Essentially, nature ran the experiment for us, lifelong low LDL from birth, from one quiet gene with no apparent downside. There are even people with both copies broken, so they don't produce PCSK9 at all, and they have very low LDLs, and they're healthy. So what does the gene actually do? So PCSK9 is a protein that tags your LDL receptors in the liver. The LDL receptors are the proteins that pull LDL out of the blood. Less PCSK9 means the receptors survive for longer and keep clearing LDL out of the blood, which lowers your blood LDL particle levels. And we already have antibody injections that block PCSK9 and interfering RNA strands that also block it, and they work really well. But they both require repeated injections for life. So the question this new therapy asks is fairly simple. Instead of blocking the protein forever, why not switch the gene off just once? The therapy is called VERVE-102, and that's just the development code, not actually a product name, because there is no product. Here's what happens after the infusion. Lipid nanoparticles, which are just basically small fat particles, the same delivery family as the mRNA vaccines, carry the editing machinery to the liver. And inside the liver cells, a tool called a base editor finds one precise position in the PCSK9 gene and chemically converts a single DNA letter, an A, into a G. There's no cutting of the strand. It's a tidier and probably safer approach than classic CRISPR technology. And that one letter change disables the gene, so the cell stops making functional PCSK9. And because liver cells pass the edit on when they divide, that change is permanent. Now, two things people immediately worry about, so let's deal with them. First one is, can it be passed to your children? Well, the answer is no. This edits liver cells only, and that's called somatic editing. Eggs and sperm are untouched, so your children inherit your original genes. Secondly, could it edit something else by accident? Off-target editing is the main worry, and the honest answer is extensive screening hasn't really found meaningful off-target edits yet. But it's not impossible, and that's why trials are still being done to see if there's any longer-term problems with these type of therapies. Right, the actual results. And I'm going to give you the history in order because the setback is as informative as the success. The first version of this was called VERVE-101 and went into trials in 2022. It lowered LDL substantially, and then the program was paused in 2024 after safety signals. A significant rise in liver enzymes and a worrying drop in platelets in one patient traced back to a component of the delivery nanoparticle. The developers then went away and re-engineered the delivery system and came back with VERVE-102. And it's worth noticing that sequence. They had a signal, they paused, they redesigned, and now they're retesting. And that's the whole pharmaceutical safety system doing its job properly. And it's also a reminder that we're still really early. These are really small trials in small numbers of people. Now the current data. The HEART-2 study, published this year in the New England Journal of Medicine, one of the top medical journals. With updated results in mid-2026, 35 patients with inherited high cholesterol or established coronary artery disease were given the single infusion. And at the higher doses, PCSK9 protein was down by about 88% and LDL cholesterol down by up to 62%. And in the patients followed the longest, the effect continues. It doesn't drift back. Tolerability was pretty good. Some infusion reactions were found, and there were transient liver enzyme rises, but nothing like that first generation. And the durability is really the whole point. Remember the Dallas story. Those people weren't protected by low LDL so much as by lifelong low LDL. Cholesterol damage accumulates over time. It's a dose times duration. It's the closest medicine has come to giving someone the protective genetics they weren't born with. Now, the honest assessment, and this is actually pretty important, because everything I've just told you comes from a few dozen patients followed for a few months to a couple of years. Not thousands, not decades. So we don't even know if this prevents heart attacks or strokes. LDL is a very good surrogate marker of outcomes, but we need outcome trials to actually tell us if this is an effective medication. We also don't know what a liver is going to look like after it's been edited 30 years down the road, and we can't fully rule out rare off-target effects because finding a 1 in 10,000 problem needs 10,000 patients to find it. And the permanence cuts both ways. If something unexpected turns up, you can't stop the drug. There's no drug to stop. A daily tablet is a decision that you can reverse tomorrow. This is a decision that made once is for life. And I think that demands a much higher standard of proof than anything reversible. And the trials that would provide it are years away. So anyone telling you that this is the end of statins is way ahead of themselves because this is nowhere near ready for public consumption. Assuming that the data holds up in the bigger trials, who would get this first? Well, it won't be given to the general public and not for a long time. Usually it will go to those in the highest need first, and that will be familial hypercholesterolemia patients, those born with very high LDL levels that start damaging their arteries in childhood, where a one-time lifelong treatment makes the most sense. And then it will go to people with the most severe established disease where their therapies aren't working or aren't really manageable. And the economics points the same way. A one-off genetic therapy will be priced really quite high. If you think about how much it costs for a lifetime of alternatives, that's how much they're probably going to price this genetic treatment as. For everyone else, the slightly boring truth is that actually statins and ezetimibe and the existing injectables actually have a huge evidence base that tells us that they work. So the gap between the headline and the reality. The headline says, end of cholesterol tablets. The reality, this is a genuinely impressive early phase program. With one safety pause already, there's no outcome data, and there's years of trials ahead. Certainly worth watching closely. Thanks.